So my full name is Lolia Holder. Very luckily, my mother gave me my name Lolia, and my aunt Vera gave me the name Dorsey. My mother is Louise Eastman, and my father is Elisa Holder. So I grew up mostly with my mother here in Rhode Island. My father was present when I was younger, but didn't play as big of a part in my life as much as my mother. And I would say my aunt Vera Tarbutt, is my second mom. So she was constantly in my life. I spent multiple summers with her. And even now when I come back to visit, Auntie Vera is always there. So I have multiple mothers and loving caregivers.
Wonderful.
Mother's is Louise Eastman. Her mother was Teresa Mason, and the parent line that we trace back to Barbados was Nathan Eastman as well. So that's our lineage back to Barbados. On my father's side, my father's family also came from Barbados. So my dad is Elisa Holder. His mother is Edith Chinko Williams, and then his lineage also came from Barbados as well.
Excellent.
I do. I was very blessed. I didn't grow up with either of my grandfathers, but I grew up very closely with both of my grandmothers. My mother's mother, so Teresa Mason, grew up in my house when I was younger. She lived with us from the age of probably about, I want to say I was 7 till I was 15. And she had many fond memories of Liberia. She was someone who was very strong woman. She was a police officer back in Liberia, so she always was very stern and firm. But the biggest thing I probably learned from her was about respect. So after school, she would sit down with me, help me with my homework, teach me my lesson, and always was talking about, Abe, you gotta respect your elders. You know, even if you don't know the answer, make sure you go to school, show the teachers respect. So that's something I learned from her. And then as I said previously, my mother and father split when I was younger, but I often would go to my grandmother's house on the weekend because my father ended up living with my grandma, my dad's mom. And so with her, it was always about cooking. So every single time I went there, it was, Grandma, are we gonna make challah? Grandma, are we gonna make milk candy? So probably the fondest memories with her was just being in the kitchen. She definitely, because I only saw her every second weekend, she doted on me and made sure that I had all those very nice Liberian treats and enjoyed that with her. Very special memories. Say, yes, I heard stories, but for my mother's mother, Teresa, it was very hard for her because she actually stayed in Liberia a little bit longer and had a little bit of the war. So oftentimes for her, the story she shared with me was about the war and how it was horrible, how she really struggled, how she wanted to be around her children because most of her children had actually left Liberia and either been in Germany, like my Aunt Vera, or the States, like my mom and my uncle. So I didn't have the best memories from my mother's mother about Liberia. However, my dad's mom would always talk to me about the glory days of Liberia, as she would call them. You know, Liberia wasn't like what it was when it is now. There were the streets, you know, it was a tourist spot. Everyone wanted to come here. All the Americans would come here. We had so much export. It was a land of plenty. She talked about the oil that they had, the diamond, and the land in Crozierville that they often farmed. So she definitely talked more about the days of old and how wonderful Liberia was, and shared memories of just her life growing up and how she enjoyed being there. And she was very sad that she had to leave her home country. She often lingered to go back. My grandmother, my mom's mom, Grandma Teresa, actually did want to go back, and she did. So she actually passed away in Liberia. And I think I never quite understood it as a child why these two women, even though they went through this traumatic experience, wanted to go back to Liberia until I finally went back to Liberia. And that was just an amazing experience. I think it's like nothing else. When you finally go back to, I guess, the homeland and you make the connection with all the stories and the traditions of the people that you have raised you, it's just this feeling of you're settled, you're at home, you're at peace. I think the biggest thing for me when I first went was everything made sense. All the things my mother did to me as a child and said to me as a child made sense. One of the fondest things was Saturday morning. So as a kid, I never ever wanted to wake up at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, as my mother did, to clean the house. It's like, it's Saturday. All of my American partners are sleeping in on Saturday. It's what they do. Why is it that we wake up on Saturday morning and clean the house? I go to Liberia and everyone is cleaning. There was a man in our front yard picking up the garbage. There was the people in the sewing shop, they were cleaning, the people next door. And I was like, Mommy, what is everyone doing? And she's like, it's Saturday. Everyone wakes up on Saturday and clean. It's what you do. And I said, oh, okay, I get this. Everyone does it. It's not something that you have made up or you've done to torture me. It's what you do in Liberia. The same thing with the fruit. She always just had this passion for this plum, mangoes or plum, as she would say. This plum's not good as back home. This avocado's not as good. The butter pear, the avocado's not as good as back home. And when I had that fruit from Liberia, I was like, well, of course, it makes sense now. It's not as good. You have been speaking truth this whole time. It is not as enjoyable as back home. And even her recipes, her cooking, my mom was a big cooker. So she would often make jollof rice and do a big cook up. And she would always say, well, baby, this thing not sweet, oh. And of course, me not knowing anything else. Yeah, it's sweet. It's good. It's delicious. And she was saying, hey, man, this thing not sweet like the way back home. If I were cooking outside, it'd be good. And she finally, when I got home, she cooked for me outside. And I had the best seafood and the best jollof rice, the best palm butter that I've ever had. And I went, okay, yep, I understand again. The American version is not sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely had a lot of connections when I went back, and a lot of fond memories just from the stories my parents told me. Made sense to me. So I was twofold. The first thing I felt was gratitude, and just it humbled me, and I was very grateful. I consider myself a Liberian American. So Liberian first and then American, but I'm also very much aware that I am Americanized, even though my mother tried very hard to make sure that I still had all these Liberian traditions. But I was grateful for the life that I had. I have a wonderful education. I have a wonderful opportunity to live overseas. And I don't think if I lived in Liberia throughout the war, I don't think I would have all of that. So I was grateful for the opportunity that my mother and my aunts and uncles gave all of us coming over here for a better life. But also that I kind of was just excited, because even though Liberia is not what it used to be, there was so much joy and happiness. And that was probably one of the best vacations that I ever had. How much joy in the simple things in life these children had. So while I was on the trip, it wasn't supposed to be an educational trip, but I'm a teacher. In Australia, I used to be in the classroom. I taught what they consider kindergarten. It's prep to grade 6. And so my mom's biggest gift, she has always asked me, is that when you come home, maybe my only gift I want from you is to teach the kids. She says, you're a teacher. She is someone who is passionate about education, and she wanted me to just teach those kids. And when I taught them, just every single day, all the neighborhood kids would come from the yard. Some days I would have 6, some days I would have 20. And we just did lessons. And I just saw how happy they were to be learning. There was no prize for them to come. They all came willingly. We just called them over. And then as the weeks went on, more and more kids would come. So it just made me realize that education is so valued there. And I don't think we value it here as much. So that was just amazing for me to see. And then just going out with my cousins and realizing that even though I do have a very large family here, my family is endless there. I still have a multitude of cousins that I have never met. On my father's side, I had uncles that I had never met and never even really thought of. So it was definitely a fantastic experience. I want to go back. I enjoyed the time there. Like I said, mentioned previously, my mother now has moved back to Liberia as well, and she is just doing amazing things for the country. She has always been passionate about education, so she sponsors and takes in several different children to help them go to school. She helps at the church as well and has been recognized for all of the charity work that she's doing there, because her biggest thing is education, church, and that's her way of trying to build up the country and supporting the country that way. And yeah, so when I've done that, I just want to be part of that journey. I want to continue to support those children, continue to educate when I go back and visit the schools that I did as well. So it was definitely a worthwhile experience. It was amazing. It just happened. So my mom asked me to do that for her, and then when my cousin saw me doing that, he then set up a visit with 3 schools. So I ended up having an opportunity to visit 3 different elementary schools there as well, talk to the teachers, gave them lectures. So I spent an hour at each school giving them lectures and talking to the principal of the school, and talked about what my role is now. So I mentioned I was a teacher previously. I'm now considered a head of curriculum. So in Australia, that's the person that's in an administrative role who designs their curriculum for the school. And I actually now coach teachers on their pedagogy. So how they teach, the ways they're teaching. And so I had that opportunity to do the same thing in Liberia and talking to the teachers there about how they teach and the basis of the foundation and what they need to do to make sure that the students are being successful. And it was just a blessing. So I hope to continue those relationships. I did get a couple of emails that I want to make sure that I'm staying connected with those schools, but it was definitely something I want to give back to my country as well. Jen told me one. I'm not sure if it's quite a Liberian saying or if it's my mommy's saying that she turned into herself. It was dirty dishes never sleep in the sink. Was the something I heard often as a child, meaning that you don't go to bed with a dirty house, you clean your dishes, they don't sleep in the sink. So that's something I often heard from her. And it's funny, the sayings that she instilled in me, I do that. So I never leave dirty dishes in the sink. I still continue. I mentioned that I wake up on Saturdays. I wake up every single Saturday at 6 a.m. and clean my entire house. And I call her and I said, I'm doing it again. She's like, what? I'm like, the things you instilled in me when I was younger, I'm doing them. I'm doing them now. I'm continuing to do them. So yeah, it's just those sayings that you think are just offhand, they actually mean something to us children. My mother, I think I'm becoming more like both my mom and my aunt. My mother is someone who I would say is a strong, independent woman. And often people will think that she's very quiet and very shy, but she actually has quite a strong voice when she's put her back up against the wall. But she is someone who everyone would tell you she would give you the clothes off her back. So I think and I feel like that's exactly what she's doing now. She's following in my grandmother's footsteps. The house on Benson Street that my mom is currently living in was a house that they grew up in. And back then, everyone tells me that it was open door, always. Grandma always took in the kids from the crew yard next door, the kids from, Crozierville, the kids from wherever, and she always made sure to look after them. And they constantly had, other children in the house that grandma would take in for a year or 2, or even for a couple of years. And my mom is now doing that same thing. So even though she is this shy, quiet woman, she's definitely someone who is charitable, cares for others, and always wants to make sure that she's giving back to the community. And I think I'm trying to be like her as well. She was someone who was fearless. She moved halfway across the world on her own, because initially she came by herself without my father, and started this life. And often people say, oh my goodness, you moved all the way to Australia and no one, and no one there. And I said, well, my mom did it. My mom moved to America and knew no one and started her life, and wanted the best for her family. And once she did get better, her first instinct was to help others. I just remember even growing up in Rhode Island, she had other people living with us. She's continuing to do that with my grandmother. And I hope that I'm doing the same as her. I hope that I'm going to be this charitable, amazing person that she is. Oh, my Aunt Vera, she's just, I love my Aunt Vera as well. I would say her best quality is how selfless she is. She is someone I would say who is the opposite of my mother, because she's definitely not quiet. If anyone knows my Aunt Vera, she is a public speaker. She gives to many and is willing to give her time to many charitable organizations. And I would say that the fact that she uses her voice and her attributes to better other people, both of them get that from my grandmother. They just do it in different ways. So my mom would be the quiet, humble one about it. She'll take in a few kids and support them that way. Where Auntie Vera, because she is someone who is a public speaker and knows how to use her words for the benefit to arrange for other people to kind of support her cause, she uses her skills in that way. So they're both people who are charitable, independent, strong, and I try to be like both of them as well. The funniest thing, so I wouldn't say I'm a funny person, but I do know there are several funny stories about her. So like I said, she is someone who doesn't mince words. And when she says something to you, she means it. A funny story when I was a kid was she told me, I probably was maybe 6 at the time, to clean my room. And at the time I thought, okay, clean my room, I'll do that, no big deal. I went to clean my room and I took everything and actually gathered it up and put it in a couple of garbage bags. When I took the garbage bags, I put them, we live in the 3rd floor street, and I just threw them outside the 3rd story window because I thought that was appropriate. Now, my mother didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so she just kindly took me outside and said, "Abby, it is snowing outside. You need to go and pick up all the snow." It wasn't snowing. It was the fact that all of the loose papers that I had dumped outside were blowing up to the window. So she told me that I needed to go out and pick up all the snow. In my childhood mind, I thought I had done exactly what she said. I cleaned up my room. I took all the garbage bags, dumped it outside. But from a 3rd story window, it probably wasn't the best. So yes, that was my mother. She just never minced words. It was just kind of like, you need to go pick up all the snow. Just go outside and pick up all the snow. So I think not that my parents, but I think our family does. So from the time that I was a baby, we always spent Christmas, Thanksgiving, all the special holidays with the matriarch of the family. So when I was younger, that was my grandmother. My grandmother was still alive. So my Aunt Vera, my Uncle Ulu would all come to our house. And because my mother is an entertainer, we would have these big seafood feasts for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and we make sure that grandma blessed the food. Another thing that we continued on was every single Sunday before church, we would have prayers, which again, I always thought everyone had prayers before they went to church, but every single Sunday, grandma would gather us all in, my mom, and we would say our Bible verse. We all had to say our favorite Bible verse. We all had to then say a prayer. We would read a Bible passage, and grandma led that. I then realized when going back to Liberia, that was something that a lot of families did. Unfortunately, I have not carried on that tradition now, but whenever I do see my mother, we do carry on that tradition as well. Just, the prayers together before the family. And now that my grandmother has passed on, we still continue the tradition of being with the family. We now go to my Aunt Bernice. So my Aunt Bernice is my grandma Teresa's sister. So she's now the matriarch of the family. And again, we continue with the prayers right before Thanksgiving and Christmas, and on Sundays as well. She makes sure we all do our devotion and say our favorite Bible verse. I think I am who I am because of them. My grandmother, again, she was the one that helped me with school when I was younger. I actually, surprisingly, my mother laughs to this day that I'm an administrative officer at a school because I hated school. I absolutely hated school, and I didn't do well at it when I was very young. So when I was in grade 1 and 2, I actually failed English and math and needed to get tutoring from my grandmother. And my mom said, "We don't fail. Education is very important." And my grandmother felt that as well. So she actually sent all of her kids to private school back in Liberia. And then my grandmother felt that I would have to do well here. So she sat with me and made education important. I think because of my grandmother's influence and how much we practice after school and how she talked to me about education changes your future, that is why I became an educator. I saw the struggle with certain students. I saw the struggle that I had when I was younger, and I didn't want other students to feel that way. I didn't want kids to feel like they had to struggle with school. And from a very young age, I decided that I was going to be a teacher. I probably think maybe grade 3, and I never changed my mind, never once deterred from it. All through high school, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And I would say that was greatly due to how much time my grandmother spent with me doing lessons. We had this little sight book, and I believe it was from Liberia actually, where she made me memorize these words. I can't remember the order, but it was a, as, is, all of these. It was this green little sight book that I had to practice with her after school, and the same thing with a multiplication. So she influenced me that way. I would say my mother and my Aunt Vera definitely influenced me. My Aunt Vera was fortunate to get her PhD over in Germany. So when she did that, I again saw the value of education, but then I also saw how independent she was and how she was determined to better herself. So I guess I took that on as, well, you can always better yourself. There's never a wrong age to try to improve yourself. You can go overseas and do these things and then come home. And that was my plan initially, was to go overseas to Australia, improve myself, try working in Australia and see how that would go. But then I fell in love. So I had the great opportunity when I was at Rhode Island College. Rhode Island College was the university that I got my education degree in. And in my last year, they offered an exchange program where you could get your final prac or your student teaching overseas. It was either England or Australia. And at the time I thought, I'm never gonna go to Australia. Let's do it in Australia. So I went to Australia for 3 months, and I love the country. I love the people. The people are very, as they would say, laid back. Everything is she'll be right, mate, which means everything is fine. There's no worries. Everything is going to go easy. Teaching there was amazing as well. It's very different to America, where everything's done in a partnership. I don't think they foster competition. So yeah, I just love that. In those 3 months, I met a guy, and his name is Jamin Brazali. He's Australian Italian. So his parents, actually, one of his grandparents were born in Italy, and they did the same thing. Born in Italy, moved to Australia, had their kids, both sides of his family. And I met him and actually thought, oh, it's great, but I'm only here for 3 months. So, I'll date him, but then I'm going to go back. So I did end up leaving Australia after my 3 months. 2 years of working in America, I just wasn't loving the education system. So I told my mother, and she remembers this day, Mommy, I'm just going to go back to Australia for a year, earn some money, get my skills so I can come back to America and improve myself. And she said, you're not coming back. And I said, no, don't worry, I'm going to come back. And I haven't. And she laughs to this day because I had emergency money. And this emergency money that I had was $1,000, which was not a lot. Like $1,000 barely buys you a plane ticket back to America. So I said, I have my emergency money. I'll come back if I need to. And she said, you're not coming back. And of course she was right. I went back. I fell in love with the guy that I met the first time, Jamin. And I've been there now for over 13 years living in Australia. Because it's a tropical destination. There's palm trees. It's luscious. It's amazing. And my mom, once she visited twice. She said she understood why I fell in love with it. It's because it's actually very similar to Liberia. She came and she was just in heaven. Abby, you see this plant here? That's the same we got in Liberia. Abby, you see these mango trees in the park? That's the same way in Liberia. So she fell in love with it because it reminded her of home. It's very tropical. It's a very humid climate, and it's beautiful. I love my job there. I don't think I would have the same opportunity here in America that I do there. Like I said, I was able to climb the ranks quite quickly. I'm ahead of curriculum. which it's an administrative role. I guess it would be equivalent maybe to a vice principal in the States, but vice principal just of curriculum. And I don't know if I would be able to do that here as quickly as I did there. I am one of the youngest head of curriculums in my city. I'm so thankful that I've had the opportunity that I've had, and I just keep striving. And again, that's due to my role models, due to my Aunt Vera, due to my mom, who just have always pushed themselves to do better, to do more. So, but as far as my career, I do have aspirations to become a principal one day. I currently have taken some courses to do that. My principal is behind me. He thinks that he just is always blown away. He's like, "You're just such a go-getter." He's like, "You just do so much." And I said, "Well, that's just the Liberian in me." Like, it's just what you do. I think all of Liberians are hard workers. So when they see how much time and dedication that I'm willing to put in, they're just blown away. But to me, that's just what you do. I don't know any Liberians who kind of just sit back and take it easy. The Liberian culture is always to push yourself forward. So I'm just doing that there. I would say, first of all, dedication and goal setting. I didn't have initially the plan to go out and become a head of curriculum. My whole goal was just to be the best teacher that I could. And I was dedicated in that. And then once I was, the best teacher, I felt like I hit my plateau. I gave myself some goals, and then I put some steps in place to reach those goals. I don't think it's necessarily how educated you are or how much experience you have. I think those things contribute to it, but it's about how much time you are willing to put in. And as long as you're willing to find the right answers and go to the right people, I think you really could, improve yourself. In Rhode Island, Liberian has a very big Liberian population. So, and I always felt I was kind of in two worlds. When you went to a cookout or a barbecue, as surrounded by Liberian people, I definitely felt my Liberian accent came out more. As you can hear, I slip into it when I'm talking to Liberian people. And I never struggled with that when I was around Liberian people here in Rhode Island. It has actually been a struggle in Australia. I very much want to keep my identity. So I cook Liberian food, not often because it's hard to find all the ingredients, but my husband eats Liberian food. So I cook my jollof rice, I cook my palm butter, and I want to make sure that I don't lose that being in Australia. There are very few where I live in my city, there are very few Liberians, but I listen to Liberian music as well because that's just who I am, and I'm continuing to dance. I make sure that I stay connected to my cousins. We don't want to lose that connection. So we make time to call each other, even though with the time difference, we have this family Skype group so that we can get connected and make sure that I don't lose that. I never want to just become just American. I don't want to have that identity. I call myself Liberian American. That's the name, even all through high school and college, I gave myself that title because I feel like I'm a Liberian first. I look the way I look, I dress the way I dress. Because I am Liberian, I am very fortunate now that my mom is in Liberia. I wear all African clothing to work. I have an Instagram page, because that's what the young kids do now, called Lolia's African Closet. And it's all my outfits that I wear to work. And a lot of them are clothes that I get from home because, again, I am not ashamed. I am beyond proud to be a Liberian American. And I show that to the Australian people there. And they just think it's great. Where do you get all these clothes? I'm like, it's one of a kind. My mom's tailor made it for me. So yeah, never want to lose that. So I will continue to be the Liberian American that I can be. Ooh, I would say palm butter. No, jollof rice, then palm butter, then collard greens. I have like a ranking order. Oh, and then fufu and soup. Yes. I think we need to make sure that we don't forget Liberia. I often feel that maybe people my age, so many of them have not actually visited Liberia. So they know they're Liberian and they understand all the traditions or the Americanized traditions that we have here. But until I think you visit, you often forget that Liberia is a place and there are people still there, and that we need to go back and make sure that we are not um, forgetting about our homeland. Whether you go back and move back to Liberia and try to improve it, like my mother has, or you're like myself, where I say, I do have this other life now. I don't think I can move back, but I definitely want to contribute in some way, whether it's financially, with the skills that you have through education. I think we need to make sure that we just don't forget that that's where we've come from, because our grandparents, our ancestors want us to rebuild and want us to make sure that Liberia goes back to what they knew. Um, Even just talking about it over the Christmas break, I was spending it with my dad's family. We just watched this documentary about from the 1980s about how glorious Liberia was, and it was this advertisement actually to the American market about Liberia, and they were so excited to see it. You see, this is Liberia that we know. The Liberia that you visited is not, it's not this. We need to bring it back to that. We need to make sure that we don't forget where we've come from and honor our ancestors by supporting the country in that way. But my contribution will be with my education. If I could just take some of my time and donate it to those kids, continue to make those connections with the schools that I have made that connection with, I feel like then I am improving the next generation in that way. Or there are so many kids who can't actually afford school. My mother and I, because she's there, I tell her every year as a Christmas present. My Australian family actually now doesn't give Christmas presents to each other. They give me money. They give me each $100 and $150, and we sponsor a kid for a year to go to school. Mm-hmm. That she has around her, or the children in the yard that she has around her. She goes, well, my daughter has made this financial contribution. If you can't afford to go to school, and that's a school of choice, whatever school it is, we will pay for your child to go to school. It shouldn't be a burden to get an education, especially when for us, it's something we would have bought something ridiculous, new headphones, a new dress that we don't need, where you can provide an education. So that's just our way of kind of giving back.